Welcome to the Life and Faith Podcast. I'm Dan.
And I'm Josh.
We're experiencing life and faith every day, and if you're listening, we hope you are too. We're talking about life, the Bible, family, news, all sorts of other stuff, all from the perspective of by faith believers. If you enjoyed this conversation, like what you hear, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, so this is episode 2 of Life and Faith Podcast. And we got past our first one, so, just got to get past that first initial hurdle, right?
Yeah,
it's out there.
Yeah, we put it on its feet. We got through one. We proved to ourselves we could do it.
Yeah.
I mean, just setting up the gear last night, I was testing things. I was walking around this table, walking around there, testing stuff, listening. What's it going to be like for him? I just want him to sit down and be able to speak and not have it be a big thing and not have any technical issues. And so far, so good.
It's amazing what goes behind the scenes. Like, I'm sure that the case with anything, but a podcast, it doesn't just happen, right? You're well aware of that now at this point. Yeah. There's a lot that goes into it. Yeah, but I appreciate, all the work that you've done to set up, and feel like we can have some good conversation as a result of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Dan and I talked about, kind of going back and forth, taking turns with topics that we'd like to talk about on the podcast. And I was just sharing with him, actually, when we weren't recording, that I started off thinking about what do people want to hear? What do I think people most want to hear about? And I realized over the course of several weeks that we had to think about these kinds of things. That's probably not a good direction to go in. A better direction is what is something that I'm passionate about that I can easily talk about, and just as a natural result, people will find, that informative. Find, I can relate with that, and that's our hope, at least when we put these out there, and really trying to follow a sense of like, what does God want us to talk about? Being led that way rather than just saying, what do other people want us to talk about? Obviously, we hope that people find this informative. We hope that people will listen. But that should really just be, I guess, a byproduct rather than the driving force of this podcast. And I don't know how you feel, Dan, but that's kind of my thought process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I really want to listen to what someone is passionate about.
Yeah.
I almost don't want to listen to something that is sort of, I don't want to say contrived, but like, if you're kind of half in, half out, I think people will be able to hear that.
Yeah,
if you're not really into it and you're just going through the motions and stuff, it won't have that life.
Yeah.
Life is in the blood, and if the blood's, if it's pumping, then if you're into it, then it's great, and you're being passionate, then people will, you build it, they will come, kind of thing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so the first topic that I had here today, it's really a big topic, but it's something that I figured that we can flesh out and discuss, like the various nuances of it. And you've probably heard this topic talked about before, and we by no means ever claim on any of these podcasts to be experts in the field on these kinds of things, but it's just two average dudes, right? Just talking about life. That's really the theme of this podcast. So jumping into the topic here, I'd like to talk about the mental health crisis. We hear about this all the time, but they really talk about the mental health crisis in this country, and really the world, right? It's pretty broad of who it affects, and I'm sure if you're listening to this, someone who's either going through that right now. You yourself may be going through that. You may put yourself in that category of just, I'm not doing well in this area of mental health. And of course, we know that connects to all facets of life. So, but even if it's not you, you probably know somebody personally who's going through it or has gone through it. So it really affects all of us. It's a big topic, but I'd like to kind of segment it out. Any thoughts that you have, Dan, on this?
Oh yeah, plenty of thoughts.
Yeah,
plenty of thoughts. I almost want to just let you sort of say what you're thinking, because I have so many thoughts about it that I will actually
so many different
dominate
directions
that
we can go.
Yeah, because like you said, everybody knows somebody, and I certainly have enough history with something such as mental health, or sort of I look at it like it holds hands with emotional and physical and
Yes.
spiritual health.
It's all connected.
And it's all interconnected, and sort of like the human condition is so that mental health is going to be a part of it's going to be a part of your life whether you handle it well or not. You know what I mean? Some people maybe don't struggle, but they still deal with it because it's just like sugar in a cake. It's there.
Yeah.
You have to deal with it one way or another. So, like, how do you choose to deal with it?
Mm-hmm.
This way, that way, whatever,
Yeah.
Positively, negatively. I spent a lot of time dealing with it negatively in my life, so.
Yeah.
Just going to move my microphone here. Go ahead.
So I kind of segmented it out, like, before we get into, like, there's a lot, like we said, we can approach it at several different angles, but I'd like to at least address kind of what I have been, as I chew on this topic, what I think are some major factors that are connected to this. Like, why are we seeing an increase in this like never before? Like, I'm not going to say that this is a new issue. It's always been an issue, right, since the dawn of time. But you hear more, you never heard, more than ever, there's people talking about this and talking about how it's on the rise and it's increasing. So, first of all, I think that there is a worldwide epidemic of identity. There is people more than ever are confused about their identity, and we could go all sorts of routes with that as well. I'm going to give some high level overview of different subjects, and we can probably go through and unpack these later. But first of all, just identity, and you can go so many different ways with that, but like, you could say I identify as an American. I identify as this political party, or you could say I identify as a mother, as a father, as you can, all these different things. We have different hats that we wear in life, but all of that sort of seems gray and vague these days. Like, am I this? Am I supposed to be focusing on that? And like, what priorities? So, identity has a lot to do with like how you identify. That really resonates with your mental health, and it can really put a strain on it if you don't know who you are, or not to get ahead of myself, but whose you are. So, and secondly, we could also talk about how, hey, we're not that far removed. It seems like we're getting away from it more and more as time goes on, but we're not that far from like a major, like when we look back on history, this I'm sure will be somewhere in the history books of like the year where the world kind of stopped, 2020, the pandemic, whatever you want to call it, whatever your opinion is on that. Staying home as much as we did, not having contact with other people as much, not face to face, that's going to take its toll. Mm-hmm. And I think that's absolutely a part of this. And it was something that people were bringing up from the very beginning when all that started. And other people were saying, that doesn't matter. Like, what matters is X, Y, and Z. And now, of course, hindsight is 20/20. Even I think some of those people that were on that side of the fence are looking back saying, oh yeah, we weren't really aware of what the real toll that was happening on people.
Yeah. We have the big, which is we didn't go outside. Mm-hmm. We didn't interact. And we have the small, in that when we went outside, we maybe didn't see their faces.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. We didn't see a smile. We could see it in the eyes,
maybe. It was
maybe.
Covered up. Yeah.
Or, we... I don't want to say we pretended, but we sort of hoped against hope that it wouldn't have a lasting impression on us, right? We thought, okay, I'm just going to go home and work in my jams for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, we can do that. But then it lasted, and then we said, okay, it was literally like we had the stomach flu for 2 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then expected that we were just going to bounce back.
Yeah.
And go, well, it's just like before. well, obviously, nothing is ever just like before.
Yeah.
It's like it's gonna have a lasting impression or a lasting effect on you. So now, I remember I was hanging out with a group of coworkers, and we were playing putt-putt, of all things, right? Because we were like, we need to get out and do something.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, like, this group of coworkers, we all like each other. We have there's not, as I understand, there are no bad relationships in this group. But we just wanted to get together because we had actually never been in the same room together since becoming a team. And I got to tell you, it was weird.
Yeah.
You know, it was, I mean,
Everybody was out of practice.
Do you remember your first real interaction with a group of people after everything? And do you remember was it weird then? And I almost felt like I had to relearn how to interact with people.
Yeah, in certain circles, I went longer than others. For example, in my church, we weren't on hiatus for too long, and we were back in person trying to meet as quick as we could. But there was definitely a solid month at least before we did that. But even then, this would be a great case study, because even then, when you're meeting, there's still in the back of your mind there's all these worries and concerns. So even if you're there in person again, there's an element there where you're just kind of detached from everybody still, even if you're there because of what's going on in the world, right? And even if you have this, people had different perspectives even through the thick of all of it, where some people were more concerned than others. But even if you yourself weren't a person that was overly concerned, or at least comparatively to other people, you still knew in your mind probably everybody else around me, especially like if you were just going to the store, like people are panicked.
Yeah.
And so it was, even if you were doing well mentally, you had to constantly be concerned about other people around you, because sometimes you could experience erratic behavior because of how people are just on the edge.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
It reminds me, it's interesting because I don't know how old you were when 9/11 happened, but I was an adult at the time. And
I remember it well, we'll say that.
Okay. But I think you would have been a kid at that point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I was an adult though, and I remember after it happened, everybody was wearing these little American flag pins.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was weird. It had kind of the opposite effect because it really brought people together,
Yes.
and we felt a common brotherhood.
Both major parties.
For maybe a month.
Yeah,
or
both
whatever.
major parties
Didn't
kind of were
last.
unified.
Yeah, we all were like, oh, this is, you know what I mean? This is something that happened to us.
Yes. Yeah.
And we banded together in that moment, and for a little while, and say what you will about the politics of the situation, that's not my point. My point is somehow that difficulty and I want to say tragedy, but I'm just saying as we related to it in terms of mental health, we sort of, for a moment, we forgot about political lines and spirit and religious beliefs and all that stuff. I mean, obviously, like, there was a big religious component to that, but I'm just saying that we weren't thinking about that for that little while. Before the influences we have today, when the times got tough, we banded together, at least for a little bit. And it wasn't like a permanent lasting thing. It wasn't like we were all holding hands, but we definitely responded in a positive way to a negative thing. Whereas in this case, it was like we were all islands.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
we were all
absolutely.
islands, and we sort of went, I can't hug my friend. I can't touch my friend. I can't even go into my house with my family. I can't, you know what I mean? It separated us, and I can't even see their face or see their smile or
when tragedy comes in the lives of any human, the things that would be most natural for us to do to comfort one another, we were told do not do.
Do not do that.
Yeah. And so it doesn't matter like what your view was on what took place in 2020. We should all be able to agree, like, you know, the simplest of things like a hug or a smiling face. Like we just, for better or for worse, we were not able to do those things, which normally that's what we would run to, right?
And it made enemies of friends.
Yes.
And enemies of strangers.
Yeah.
Because, we work, people by and large do not get along. So we work to keep those relationships going, right? It's like, if you see somebody in public that does something you don't like, you don't necessarily tell them. But people were telling you what they didn't like about what you were doing at that point. And, and that's different. You know what I mean? We weren't really working we weren't working to keep the peace at that point because of the fear and the anxiety and all that other stuff. So and really and the tragedy and all the things that were coming from that too. So there were people out there who were legitimately hurt. Yeah. And and for us as by faith believers, we were trusting the Lord, but also recognizing that we are in a sin fallen world and that it's a little bit of a house of cards. Yeah. And it could very well tomorrow's not promised kind of a thing. America's not promised. Yeah. Freedom is not promised. It's just, it's like we don't take it for granted, you and I, because that's the kind of people we are, but people take it for granted that we're free. Yeah.
And even though I would agree with you, we're not characterized by people that take it for granted. There probably are times where I could at least say for myself, I have taken it for granted. And then it takes sometimes tragedies like that to really realize that you've done that. There's a lot of things I remember thinking in 2020, man, I used to just think I could wake up tomorrow and do X, Y, and Z, and now I can't. And you never would have thought about that prior to it. But I think in a way, everything that happened, it kind of alluding to what you just said, it showed you how fragile life really is. And I think even today, you want to talk about present day in 2023, maybe we're all kind of being lulled back into this sense of security as to things are fine. It's better, which I don't think you need to go the other route either and say, always be paranoid, always be afraid. Not that at all. I would never suggest that. But having that balance of saying, don't take certain things for granted. Be cautious. I think there's nothing wrong with being cautious in life, but you don't want to be afraid. Yeah. So I think having that sense of, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but to me, this is a good example. If you've ever lost somebody, which again, we're going into mental health, this absolutely is a part of it. But when you lose somebody you're close to, that person passes away, it really is sobering mentally to think about wow, what the Bible says, the life really is a vapor. And it's both a tough time mentally, trying to think about, that loss of another human life and in the mourning that takes place. And you don't want to live in that sense, but at the same time, the sobriety that we have about life, our outlook on life, I don't know about you, but not to take away from the sadness that is there, especially for the family of the people who have passed away, but you think about the sobriety that you have in that moment when you're thinking about this person's life, and I thought I was going to see him next week, or I thought I was going to see him tomorrow, and you think about your own life, what if I were gone tomorrow, and it really puts in a good perspective of what's really important. So I've thought about this over the last couple of weeks too, what am I potentially taking for granted right now that I absolutely was keenly aware of back in 2020, for example, when the pressure was on, stress and things, your senses were heightened, so to speak.
Well, you didn't know what was next. Yeah. And there was a point where we were where we didn't know how bad it was. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we were a little the unknown. The unknown, yeah. But then also, okay, we get a handle around how bad it is. Now, how bad is the fallout?
Yes. Yep. And that is why I listed this as one of the topic, or one of the sub points, I guess, if you will, of mental health, because we probably all, to some degree, are still experiencing some of the fallout of that, but definitely some more than others. There's some people who, like you were talking about, the difficulty of reintegrating yourself into society and being in person. Like I will say this: somebody just told me last month, like, this is the first time I've ever. They shared with me they were going to the movies with their friends, and they said, I haven't done that since before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And this same person, they've shared with me that they just don't really go places anymore. Like, not necessarily because they feel like there's a reason not to go anywhere. It's just, and I can relate to this, even though I'm not doing this. I could see where mentally that becomes a hurdle of like, well, I don't have any reason to stay home, but I kind of like it. And it's more comfortable for me, so why should I go? Like, I'm being invited to these things, but I don't really want to go. And you're just like, you have this great reason why, especially if you're an introverted person, right? Yeah. To not go anywhere. It's like, I can't, man. You know, and I don't want to diminish either for anybody that maybe it was a legitimate concern to them. Not that it was an excuse, but now you're like, I don't feel like I have as much of a reason to stay home, but I like it. So. And that's absolutely a struggle for some people. So we talked about how kind of subpoints, identity, people wrestling with that, people wrestling with the pandemic, you know, the fallout from that, as we just discussed. But then also, we live in an increasingly polarized society to where sometimes, so it can be easy to say like, oh, you know, it's never been this bad before. And I get that argument, like, you know, here it's a cliche saying to say, oh, it's never, you know, comparison wise. But I think just the day and age that we live in, modern day technology, we have everything at our fingertips. The things are more polarized because we see and hear everybody's got an opinion, right? And everybody's got a voice. Everybody's got a way to express that opinion, never before. And it just kind of feels like even going back, this kind of blurs the lines with my last point in the pandemic, but tensions were so high back then, like, people would get at each other's throats real quick. And even myself, like, I'm not going to say like I was completely void of that either. Like, I felt like at my lowest point in the 2020, like, I would dip into that too. But then you catch yourself and you realize, like, wait, why am I talking like this? Like, this is not how I normally am. And really, that's a good perspective too on others. Like, somebody's lashing out at you, and well, you think, well, they're not normally like this. They must have a lot going on.
Well, the other part of it that I think about, and I think we touched on this in our last episode. I swear I'm going to get good at talking into the microphone. I apologize. So, one thing that comes to my mind is, you sort of, as a Christian especially, you have this moment in time, and this is actually always true. You, every day, okay, I have this view about things, and that is that every day you are a different person, because today you're the person who experienced yesterday.
Yeah.
So you're always changing. You're always you're
armed with more information.
You're armed with more information. Yeah. A friend of ours that we both know told me one time, no two people grow up in the same family.
Right.
And I thought that was so wise.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because your first kid knows this life. Your second kid, that's a new family.
Yeah, it's a new dynamic.
It's a new dynamic.
Yeah.
It's a new family. That family didn't exist before that person
Those
came along.
Those parents aren't going to make the same mistakes with their other kids that they did with their first, right?
And that now it's a family with two kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a kid with an older brother. And then this kid has a younger sister or whatever. You know, every day you become a new person. So, in light of everything, we sort of had as Christians this one opportunity to sort of react. Okay, and on one hand, we were Christians and we felt that we had a responsibility to our Lord to behave in a specific way. And on the other hand, we're free Americans, mm-hmm. and we had another thing that we stood on, which is, okay, for example, you can't shut down our churches.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You cannot do that. And any church that shut down was, not to say whether that was right or wrong, I have my personal opinion about that,
Right.
but any church that shut down was responding the way that they felt they should respond. Now I
That
might
in and
disagree
of
with that or
itself
whatever, but
It's
that
polarizing.
yeah, it's right. It's like you're saying. So we had this one opportunity, both as Christians and as Americans, to react the way that we felt was necessary. Because if we don't do it and we just toe the line, we'll have regret.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
or maybe you're the kind of person who feels that if you stand up and say something, that you're
the backlash.
You're doing the wrong thing that way, right? It's
Yep.
not about whether or not you agree with me personally, politically, whatever.
Societal pressures.
It's like, yeah, you have that pressure to sort of say, okay, this is obviously unprecedented.
Yep.
At least in our lifetimes, for sure.
For sure.
So we go, what is the right response here? Well, I sort of hold this Christian response, which I feel that I am the shepherd standing between the sheep and the wolves.
Right.
You know, in that way, you know, ready to whack the wolf when he comes around, right? But also an American and a free person who feels that, by the way, you can't shut down my church, or you can't tell me if I can and cannot go to my friend's house.
Yep. We all had to navigate our values in what's the word I'm looking for? Like, merge them, so to speak, in the form of actions. Like you said, it was unprecedented, so we didn't have, like, you know, any kind of instruction manual. Like, in the case of a pandemic,
break glass.
this is how you maintain your patriotism
and your dignity,
and your dignity, and your, you know, all that. So, yeah, it was a confusing time for everyone, and I'm sure any of us, like literally any of us, if we could go back in time, we would do and say things differently, probably. But you know, it kind of goes back to our last episode that we recorded, where it's like giving people the benefit of a doubt, those kinds of things, and just understanding we were all going through something that we'd never been through before, and giving each other grace, right? So, yeah, I think, you know, that absolutely goes along with it. Like, so these kind of subpoints are kind of merged, like the pandemic, and because that in and of itself was a very polarizing situation. But we have all kinds of polarizing things. And it used to be like, if you were, say, a conservative or a liberal, like, those were kind of polarizing, right? But now I feel like, at least in my lifetime, I'm observing, like, even in conservative circles, and I'm sure in the same token, liberal circles, within those same circles, you have people with differing opinions, increasingly polarized. So it's like, oh, well, you're that kind of conservative, or, well, I'm this kind of conservative, or, well, you're a moderate, or, you know, like, what do those terms even mean anymore, because of how increasingly polarized. So, not to get too far into that, that's kind of like that idea of it. And then also, again, these all kind of blur together, but another point is just social media. You know, we were talking about, I think at the beginning, about the difference between how our country handled 9/11 versus how they handled the pandemic and everything in 2020 and following. And one thing that I don't know how much necessarily it impacts, but I'm sure it does to some degree, is there was really no social media back in 2001. Maybe, like, somebody could fact check me on this and say, like, maybe there was Zanga present at that point, or I'm trying to think of what was before Zanga. Like, I don't even think MySpace was around.
Letters and stamps.
Yeah. The postal service.
We used to fold notes and pass them to each other. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, people didn't really have a platform to discuss, like, in the moment, what I'm thinking and what you should be thinking, and how I'm right and how you're wrong, and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure, like, if you were anything like me, like, during that time of 9/11, there was pretty much no point in time, at my household at least, where the news was not on. Like, it was just a constant, like, it was like background noise, and anytime there was a breaking update or something. Like everybody would come in and sit around the couch or something and tune in. But now, like, it was less of that going on. I'm sure there were still some people that were glued to the TV during the pandemic, but people were really glued to, if you take away the human element, what's the one way that we're able to communicate with each other still? And that was, from a quote unquote safe way, and that was social media, right? I can look back even on my own personal social media and realize there was so much more chatter going on a few years ago than there is right now. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing right now. People are they're getting outside, they're interacting in person more, which is great. But social media, I think, absolutely has an impact on mental health and how we view ourselves. I think that's a huge key. So not to get too far into that, because we can circle back to that one as well. Another subpoint I think on this subject is there's never been more, there's really a rise of divorce. We were talking about marriage in the last podcast episode, but there's a rise of divorce, and really even there may not be, divorce may not even be the primary issue, but like people just aren't getting married in the first place anymore. And if you think about it, so I'll just take this right back to the very beginning of the Bible. God said, the very first person that's created, Adam, he said it is not good that man should be alone. And we talked about the pandemic and how it forced us all to kind of be on our own island. People just aren't, so maybe they're having a hard time, like you were saying, adjusting to social interaction, but people, there's never, I mean, look at what's on the rise right now, and that's like dating apps and things like that, and how to,
yeah, I wouldn't even call it dating.
Yeah, they're like speed dating. That's even a thing where you go into a building and they'll set you a timer for like 5 minutes, and they have all these people, and you just kind of play musical chairs every 5 minutes and speed date. And how does that work? I'm sure there's probably somebody, maybe even somebody listening to this and saying, well, I'm married now, and I started off with that speed. I'm sure there's a bell curve there.
So funny story, funny tangent. I met my wife on plentyoffish.com.
Oh, okay.
And
see, we're a great study right here, because I met my wife on Facebook of all things. And I wasn't even trying to, here I'm talking about social media and its impact, right? I wouldn't have met my wife if we didn't have Facebook, but yeah.
Well, I always joke that if she doesn't do Elliot, I'll be like, I can order another one.
Yeah. I can go right back.
Right back to Plenty of Fish. There's a whole list of them.
Yeah.
No, Sheila said, she went through like 100 creepers, before she found the creeper that she wanted to stick with.
Yeah.
So.
And that's just a daily experience, I should say, with a lot of, it's not even young people anymore. Like you used to say, like, the 20-somethings, they're all looking to get married, but 30s, 40s, and I know that's been the case since the dawn of time, right, to some degree. I just think all this stuff is interconnected. All these subpoints that we're making here about mental health, it all goes hand in hand. And man, if you're going through divorce, somewhere I heard like the impact, the toll it has on a person, divorce is like one of the highest. They might have said it was the highest thing. Like maybe the death of a loved one or something was higher, but it's way up there, right? Especially not only affecting the couple, but if there's kids involved, kids can carry that around for years. And don't get me wrong, for anybody that's listening that has gone through that, I'm not trying to throw that in a bad light necessarily, because sometimes I'm very much aware that sometimes people can do everything in their power and maybe the other person just wants out, right? But talking about what adds to mental health, absolutely, divorce, not being able to connect, not being able to have commitments with people. I'll say this, my whole world was changed when I got married, for the better, of course, but you think differently. You start thinking in terms of we instead of I. And while we talked about last episode, there's that initial hurdle of the first like 5 or so years of your marriage. That can be that can take a toll on you, right? But in the long run, if marriage is done God's way, the way He intended it, it's going to only improve that. And for people who maybe God does have a will for them to get married, but maybe they're stuck, maybe they're paralyzed by fear, and they're like, I can't go that route. So here I am getting really deep into this topic. I haven't really gone through all the sub points, but I'll try to go through them real quick, and we can circle back to one of these and touch on it, because like I said, they're all connected to some degree. Another sub point here is I want to, we're talking, this is a life and faith podcast, right? So we can never divorce faith from what we're talking about. It's just intertwined so heavily. It's intertwined in my mind. So as you're listening to this podcast, it's, that's, you're going to get that.
I think about it like this. You have faith whether you want to or not.
Yeah, it's a part of
your life is in faith whether you're not a believer or not.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, we all have faith in something.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. And even an atheist, their faith is there's not a God, and they're religious towards that.
And everything is in response to that.
Yes.
That belief. Yep. That like when
it's your lens that you view the world through.
Yeah. When Mitt Romney was running for president, they said, "Oh, he's a Mormon." And then other people were like, "Well, it doesn't matter if he's a Mormon." And I'm like, on the contrary, it is absolutely critical that you understand how this person comes to determine right and wrong.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How does this person come to that? They believe these set of beliefs about this thing. And not to say that Protestants don't differ within the ranks, but just to say nothing could be more, nothing could touch on more things than what a person has faith in or how they view those. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, faith is so interconnected with everything, whether you're a Christian or whatever.
Yeah.
Because it really is like life in faith, whether you want it to be or not.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that in mind, like how that's going to constantly come up through this podcast, I have to touch on this. And let me preface this point with, this is not a really a harsh criticism as a point like, it's all bad, but it's a point that I think we all need to be aware of and thinking when we're on the discussion of mental health. And that is typically in Christian communities, and everybody's experience, this is all going to vary depending on the person. You could have a really good experience with this. You could have not a good experience. For better, for worse, sometimes we can be really hard on each other as Christians. We can say,
for sure,
suck it up, just put your head down, keep going forward. As long as you're praying, reading your Bible every day, things are gonna get better.
I don't know who said it, and I'm gonna repeat it anyway. We're the only army that shoots itself, shoots its wounded.
Yeah. I am not opposed to this idea of. So first, let me clarify. I'm not opposed to this because I think it's biblical. The Bible talks about how we're in spiritual warfare, and spoiler alert. Anytime you talk about mental health, it's really at its core spiritual health.
Oh my goodness!
We're going to touch on that more as we go through this podcast, but I wanted to start it off on that note because that's what everybody thinks of when they think of people and their problems. But it goes deeper than that. In mental health, yes, I'm not negating that or sliding that in any way. That's very real. But it's all connected, and at its root, it's a spiritual issue. So, if we're talking about, going into battle as Christians, that we do that every day when we wake up, whether we're conscious of it or not, we're all battling because there's spiritual forces at work with anything. It's behind everything, literally, and so. You do need to be battle ready, but understanding just like the battle, kind of like what you were alluding to, they're going to be wounded. And that, listen, person that's just been saved like a week, they're going to be wounded. You got to watch out for them. But this is the point that I really wanted to make here. Whoever you look up to as being like say for example, picture in your mind, as you're listening to this right now, picture in your mind the person you think, man, out of all the Christian warriors I know in my life, like this person, like they're just knocking it out of the park. Like they are who I look up to. I think of them as great man of God, great woman of God, great person of faith. Even that person, almost more so, they The higher people esteem somebody in like a Christian walk, they probably have a bigger target on their back, because the enemy, Satan, he would love more than anything to take down that person, because there's so many people saying, well, man, they're doing it. I just need to follow their lead. And we see that all throughout the Bible, right? Like David, a man after God's own heart, had great downfalls. And we talked about that last episode as well. Like, that's what makes the Bible unique, is that they have, even in their failures and their victories, not just the victories. So if we think about that, we need to keep in mind that the greatest among us, so to speak, I'm using quotations here, the greatest, because we know, in Christ, we're
by man's standard.
By man's standards, absolutely. We're all going to go through that to some degree, but I think in our Christian communities, whether we've intentionally done this or not, we've played it up as we're immune to those kinds of things. We are not plagued by mental health issues, but we are. And there's almost this shame in coming out and saying, I am struggling mentally. I'm not doing well, because you're afraid of what's going to be said about you as a Christian.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you're flat out going to get judged.
Yeah.
Because there's you got this huge group of people, and they're in every community. And in our community, in Michigan, there's a church on every corner. And when you get, like, in our family has attended several of them over the years. We've attended here for a couple of years or whatever, moved to a different church, whatever. You just get to know, like, my parents went to your church for a while, so I never attended your church, but I've been to several services. I got to know probably 25, 35 people, plus we work with people who attend mutual friends and stuff like that. So you just get to know other Christians, and they're just gonna do it.
Yeah,
they're gonna do it. If you stumble, we know the truth, right? I don't personally feel that way. I feel like stumbling, to me, a Christian who stumbles is no different than somebody who gets stabbed in the belly in an alley.
Yeah.
To me, that's, you're just walking down it. That's, and that, not to say that I don't judge too, but I'm just saying, in my heart of hearts, I know, like, that could, there for the grace of God go I.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I think it really takes some humility there, and just reminding that, that could be me in 2 years as well when we're working with people. But you're right, like, the natural thing is to judge. And that's a whole topic in and of itself for sure. So I'm almost to the end here, are the subpoints, and I will say this one thing I think that is a part of this equation. I don't know how much we'll be able to talk about it. Again, we're not experts here, any facet. We're not mental health professionals by any means. Lest anybody think that. I'm also not I don't have any authority or expertise in dieting or nutrition, but I think it absolutely is a part of this equation. And sadly, a lot of times people leave this out. But I think so. If again, along that line of thinking everything's connected, our body, our minds, our spirit, it's all connected. If you're not taking care of your body, and I think I can go out and say this is cancel worthy, right? But we say Americans do not, by and large, have the best health. And maybe you could say that's all. This is a deeper conversation as well, but our prosperity over the last couple hundred years, right, has led to us just kind of, we take things for granted. We take our health for granted. We just say eat, like you were saying, eat, drink, and be merry. That's kind of deeply rooted in this American idealism, as to just don't take thought for what we're putting into our bodies. But even spiritually speaking, the Bible says our bodies are the temple of the Lord, and so we should be careful, not just what we put in there, like what we see with our eyes, what we listen to, all those things, but what we ingest in our bodies. So this is all this is humbling, of course, but it's humbling for me, but it's something I've been thinking about in the last several weeks. I've actually been watching a guy on YouTube that really, he takes less of he's a doctor, but he rather than prescribing medications, he says, you know, what you're experiencing this with your body, and here's a lot of factors that can be resulting in that. Like, I won't go heavily into it, but just for example, I had never thought about this, but he explained how our bodies are highly acidic. He said so much on like a pH level that you would be somewhere like around like a battery, like even a car battery, how acidic our bodies are. And just certain things that we ingest throwing off the acidity, like if we go more of a neutral, that can throw off our whole, like, organs start not working the right way. It even affects us mentally. And so all of it's just amazing how many things are connected. He was saying, him personally, when he was in his 20s, he said, this doctor, he said, I was popping antacids like candy because I was having acid reflux. And he said, I'm not saying necessarily don't ever use antacids like that, but he said the rate that I was taking them, it was actually upsetting the acidity of my stomach and making all that completely worse. And he said it even got so bad to where I was experiencing depression. And he said, I just thought I was, it was other things. And he said, I started medicating for it. And he said, it wasn't until somebody pointed me in the direction of cutting back on the antacids. And he said, my mental health got so much better just from stopping that.
Wow.
And you would never think of that, right? But he said for him, that's what he troubleshooted, if you will, like his body, and taking that away had a direct impact. So again, lest anybody get the wrong idea, I'm not saying all you need to do is just stop taking your antacids. Like,
well, I heard this podcast and this guy says I don't need to they don't need to take no antacids.
We're gonna get letters that says I stopped taking antacids and I have acid reflux and I'm still depressed. And you told me.
Now I'm divorced.
Yeah, it's all your fault, John.
Oh my goodness.
But again, like, there's just so many facets to this conversation you can go with, and I think we do ourselves a disservice to say it can only be this that's affecting my mental health. You got to look at it holistically at all these different pieces. You think about, like, again, on the spiritual sense, another sub point of this is the whole world is groaning. I keep making this phrase commonly here where I say, never before have we seen the rise of this and that. And that's true to some degree. It's not just cliche. It's the Bible. It actually says that this will be the case. And I don't say that to be doom and gloom or to depress anybody further, especially that's listening to this. It is to say, you know what, God said this would happen, and we need to be ready for it. We need to be armed in such a way that we know how to combat it in our own lives, but also how to reach out to our fellow man, our fellow woman even, and help them out with that. Bear one another's burdens.
Absolutely.
All right, so did you want me to run through real quick the last 2 points I have? Or
I didn't know you had two more.
Yeah. So,
okay, cool. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I'll cover them real quick. That last one I was touching on specifically was we're just in perilous times. I don't say that to discredit what anybody's going through either. It's just it's more saying, like, look, the Bible knows what it's talking about, right? The Bible says this will happen. We should be what's the verse? It says we should be wise as serpents, harmless as doves. Like, we should not be ignorant of the times that we live in and how it's going to get progressively worse. But there's hope, right? So again, I don't want to go through all this seeming doom and gloom. There is hope, and we'll touch on that. But so the last couple of ones, here's an important one, I think, and that is a lot of mental help that people are being offered out there is not actually helping them. They are making things worse.
Oh man,
you got to be very careful what you go through. And again, like, you would I hope anybody listening to this would expect this from us to say, like, you really should be going to something that's Bible-based Christian counseling if you are wanting some kind of help. And let me say this too, not all that route can help you either. Some of that can make it worse. So you should still, even in that vein, be careful about what sources you go to, because just because they have a Christian banner or they have the little, what's it, the fish symbol on their business card. That does not necessarily mean that you're going to get the help
It shows
you need.
they know how to use Canva.com.
Yeah. And I'll say this, like, I've spoken to many pastors who have said, I really want to help my people. I really want to counsel them well, but I personally as a pastor don't feel like maybe they feel qualified in some areas to help, but there's some that they're just like, I don't know where to begin with this. And that's very real, and that happens. We were talking earlier about the Christian circles. Sometimes you don't think pastors are capable of going through depression. They absolutely are. And a lot of times you see pastors having to go way across town, like 1 hour, 2 hours away from where they live just to get help because they feel like there's this shame almost of admitting that you need help or counsel and that kind of stuff as a Christian leader. So, yeah, we got to be careful about what help we go through because it's not all helpful. The last thing, and I think this will resonate with you and me just because of our line of work, we work for a software company that combats this issue, and that is pornography. Even going back to 9/11, the internet was a thing, but not everybody was on it, and it was just a relatively new thing. I think it was 2001. It was about 2001 when our company started. Was it about that time frame?
Yeah, yep.
So it was right around that time, and man, you think about like the whole reason why the company started was there's this. You can see the seed form of an epidemic happening with pornography, and there needs to be some kind of answer for it. There needs to be some kind of protection for it, and I think that absolutely adds to this conversation of mental health because, like, if somebody's hooked on that, I mean, really any addiction, right? You could expand the lens, right, to any addiction is dangerous, but pornography specifically, that ties in with everything. You know, when I was talking about divorce and a fear to date, a fear to commit, sometimes somebody's really wrestling with pornography and it's got such a hold on them. It's all connected. It's amazing.
Well, I definitely want to go back to what you were saying about what you put in, you know, and how you take care of yourself and how much that's tied to what you, how you feel and your mental health, you know, because it is depressing to be, to not be involved in things and to not be, like, maybe it's not exercise, but just sitting around and getting worse is depressing. You know, if you could make a decision apart from your feelings, okay, you would decide to do what's right for you, right? If it was devoid of emotion, you'd go, okay, well, I want to feel good, you know, but then maybe the work that it would take to do so is bigger than what you can really imagine, right? For some people, it's like, I could make this better, but I would have to sacrifice so much that I'm not even willing to try.
Yeah.
You know, perfectionists can be that way. You know, we were talking about perfectionism off air.
Yeah.
But then you have that emotional component where you go, it's going to be hard. It's going to be too much for me to deal with. So I don't, you know, like, for example, want to give up eating garbage.
Yeah.
You know, it would be too hard for me
to... It's a coping mechanism, too.
Well, it would be too hard for me to live with giving up certain things. I hear it all the time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I could never do that. I could never fill in the blank.
Yep. You have a mental wall that you sometimes you don't even realize that you've put it up, and I just can't do that. Like, I've seen other people do it, but I cannot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a friend who was sick, and they used to put him on a treadmill for his work, for his part of his care, and he used to refer to it as the death march.
Oh.
You know, and I thought, well, that's half your issue.
Yeah, how you view that.
How you view that, yeah. And so that, you know, we're talking about mental health, or talking about how that sort of all leads into everything else.
Yeah.
You know, you're just in a better mood if you're active, and we talked about this before, but when you're thinking about others, you're doing things, you're interacting,
Yes.
you're getting the blood pumping, you're doing all that stuff. Because God's design for your life is not to get up in the morning and pound antacids all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that's not his, like my wife worked with someone who said she used to get up in the morning and take a big handful of ibuprofen every day.
Mm.
That is not the Lord's design. That is a result of a sin-fallen world.
Yeah.
You know, whether
think of
that's
that too.
right or
Yeah.
wrong, I'm not saying, again, not a doctor, not a health professional per se. I know that, obviously if you're not licensed, then you shouldn't even speak, I guess. But
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, I'm no
We can only speak
I'm no
to
rocket
what works
magician.
for us. Right.
Yeah, I'm not, I don't know everything there is to know, but I can tell you that I don't think God's design is not for you to get up and pound ibuprofen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, he wants
Yeah.
you to be he wants you to be alert and ready and mentally, not to say that there aren't challenges, but that's the other thing. See, okay, poor mental health is a result of a sin-fallen world.
Yes. Yep.
There's
We're
not-
getting down to the root of
Yeah.
it. Yes.
There's no
Yeah.
there's no poor mental health in
Mm-hmm.
God's perfect design.
If excuse the analogy, but if you think of like a car that has like a warning light that comes on, and you just simply ignore that, or say you actually, because I've seen people do this, they actually go in and just turn off, in the car or whatever is causing that. Like, I don't even worry
Pesky
about that.
symptom.
Like that's not actually fixing the problem, right? And you're kind of getting at the very root of all of this, and that is you having mental health. If there's a decline in that is a sign that something is wrong in your life. That maybe you're aware of it, maybe you aren't aware of it, but ultimately, just masking that is not going to help. Putting a Band-Aid on it is not going to help, and that's why a lot of people find themselves in that cycle. They get better, they have good days, they have bad days, and to some degree, that's life, right? But having jarring ups and downs all the time, it's really, and again, you can get into things chemically, medically, like all those things. I get that. I'm not knocking any of it. I don't want to make an oversimplification of this issue. But ultimately, God designed us a certain way. We do live in a fallen world. Our bodies are not perfect bodies. We know that this side of heaven, we won't have perfect bodies. So to some degree, that's part of life. But sometimes it's things that we could change, right? I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah. I'm 5'6.5". I'm 5'7" if I want. I will myself to be slightly taller.
On your driver's
Everyone
license?
is taller than me. I don't understand. That's all I know, except
Yeah.
for maybe one or two people. But I always describe people as tall.
Yeah,
They're tall. Like, no, they're normal height. You're short. Okay.
relatively.
Yeah.
speaking.
I'm 5'7", 5'6.5", whatever. And I took a job sitting in front of a screen, and I gained 50 pounds. And I wasn't 50 pounds, because I wasn't exactly 190 before that. But I ended up being like 240 pounds. Okay. And I looked at myself, and I would say the most horrible things to myself that no one would ever say to me.
Yeah.
By the way, part of the mental health thing, just to connect to that, you're almost always judging yourself more harshly than other people are judging you. You know what I mean? Because I would never say the things to other people that I said to myself. You are such a fat potato. Look at you. You're so gross. You look like
You're your own harshest critic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look like the worst you've ever looked. So at one point, I just determined, okay, I'm not going to let this be my legacy.
Yeah.
And I started working out, and I wasn't super consistent in the beginning, and I'm still polish off a sleeve of cookies, or I
Yeah.
still have these challenges, but like I still don't deal with things maybe in the best way sometimes. Like I lost somebody close to me, and I started drinking again, which I haven't really been doing in many, many years. I had to quit doing that. I started smoking cigarettes again.
Yeah.
And this was like 2-3 years ago, and in the midst of all this, like being overweight and everything, and sort
It
of
compounds.
like, it compounds and all that
Yes.
stuff. So all that to say that when I'm able to sort of do what's best for me, or when I'm able to like really get a good workout in, or when I really avoid the bad things, there's a spiritual wealth that is found in that. Because when you're doing things that aren't good for you, and I'm not saying that drinking is always bad or smoking cigarettes is that bad or whatever, I'm not saying anything about that. I'm just making the point that if you know for sure that what you're doing is bad for your health, like
if you're spiraling,
or you're indulging, or you're self-medicating, and you know it, like say for example the antacid thing, like if you know that's bad for you and you're pounding that kind of stuff, you're sort of out of sync with God's design in that way.
Yes.
Not to say that you're not in his grace or that you're not saved or something like that, but you're just sort of like, you're sort of out of the, if you're rotating around the sun, you're out a ways, and the closer you get to the middle, and the more you're doing things that are good for you, and the more you're in his way for your life. And a good example of that would be like, okay, you probably weren't pounding antacids in the garden.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, okay, so the more you're into those things, and the more you're in that way, and the harder you push to be into his design, or into his flow of life the way he designed it apart from sin, the rich wealth will come from it. Not like spiritual wealth is what I'm talking about, right? It's like and speaking of wealth in terms of finances, if you are doing what you ought to be doing, being a good steward of your finances, you know what I mean? His design is you're gonna be abundant, right? It's not like being a Christian makes you something that you're not. It's just to say he designed things to act in a certain way. When you eat healthy food and you don't eat junk, you're going to have a spiritual wealth in that. You're going to have a spiritual health in that. You're going to say, and I know that's like, people are like, oh, here we go. But what I'm making the point that the more in line you are with his way, the more that benefit comes, because his will for your life is that you would be like, you know what I mean? It's not to say that we don't still struggle with sin, or that it's somehow automatic that you're just going to be healthy because you're a Christian. It's just a matter of the fact that he designed it to behave. He designed it to be a certain thing. If you're in that design, you're not going to do things like have to pound antacids, or have to pound ibuprofen every day, or drink every day because you can't cope with the world.
Yeah.
That's a great example. You're just not going to be drinking every single day. If you know what I mean, if you're sort of like, not because you're going to will yourself against it and say like, I'm a Christian, so I don't drink. It's because you literally, your mental health will be such that you will not feel like you need to.
Yeah. Yep.
Because you have that hope, that positive expectation of good days. You have that optimism, like we have a eternal perspective, a positive eternal perspective. Okay, now maybe my problems don't seem so bad. When I first became a Christian, I would pray. Really, like even before I was officially say like I came to terms with it, I would pray. And I remember distinctly being in my car and realizing that after I had prayed, I had actually arm's lengthed my problems. Because I used to live with my problems right on my shoulders.
Yeah.
And then when I would pray, I would feel a sense of like, okay, we have some breathing room now. Whether it's not to say the problems aren't still there, or that the threats to your mental health aren't still there, but you just don't feel the weight of your sin and the weight of the roles and responsibilities that you have in life on your back. And it's like, it's not really up to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not, all this mental health stuff is, I think, directly related to, it's a directly proportional to how much weight you feel you're carrying.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Everybody feels a tremendous weight. Yeah. And that's a good point too, because one of my pet peeves, if you will, is so this doesn't help at all. Like, this is kind of what we were talking about in the Christian circles, but really this is anywhere, any group of people. You have this idea innately that what you're struggling with, nobody can really understand. And not only that, but sometimes we almost get a little competitive with our struggles, because it's like, well, you think that's bad. Listen to what I'm going through, you know, and there may be truth to that, right? I'm not going to say that that's not ever true in cases where you're listening to somebody, but man, we do each other a disservice when we ever put down or compare ourselves to what other people are going through, because life is not a comparison. We experience life through our lens, not through other people's lens, right? So, and here's where it really hits home. I hear a lot of times people just really like saying, teenagers, the worst they got going is just, what new game are they going to buy, or what movie are they going to, like,
these kids today.
Yeah, these kids today. But, I'm in my 30s now, but at the same time, I'm not so old at the point where I can't remember what it was like to, and really we never should forget what it's like to be at that age, because little children or teenagers themselves, whatever they're going through, it may pale in comparison to our adult minds as to what we deal with every day, the responsibilities of adult life. But man, what they have going on is probably, whatever they're telling you about, is probably the biggest event that they've gone through in their life up to that point. So it's huge. It's just as huge to them as what they're experiencing right now as whatever you're going through. But like you said, I think you said earlier in the podcast that every day is a new day, right? We are not the same person that we were yesterday. We have more information, more experiences under our belt to where we can make decisions with. You're
forever changed by everything that happens.
Yes.
Big or small, you are forever changed by those events.
Yeah. So we do it, and even like I'm guilty of this. I'll look back. I have the unique. I say unique. Never has there been a time where somebody can be around my age and have a perfect window. Well, not perfect. I'm embellishing a little there, but have at least some more of a glimpse into your teenage life, because I started on Facebook in like 2008 when I was a teenager, and so it's just like 2 clicks away on my Facebook app where I can go and look at memories from 13, 14 years ago, and man, I would die if people went out and made a book for everybody to see of all the stuff that I was complaining about, whining about.
Oh my goodness.
It's awful. It really is. But you know what? As much as that embarrasses me to look back on, it also is sobering to think about. You know what? That was a huge deal to me back then. And is it a big deal in the grand scheme of things? No, but back then it was. And in a way, you can look at that in a positive sense of look at where I've come from. That was a big struggle, and now I can see how God worked that out in my life. And just to be all that to say, there's a verse in the Bible that says, "Let no man despise your youth." Right? Don't let people, just because you're young, put you down. And that goes for anybody, right? Like we could say somebody who's far older than us, like, oh, they don't have as much life experience as I had. They've been sheltered their whole life, so they don't know. But we do ourselves a disservice when we start comparing our struggles with another person. And I think when we focus more on what other people are going through, it takes that focus off of ourselves as much, kind of like what you were saying earlier. And it does help us to help others. Like, God designed it that way for a reason, right?
Yeah. I also have another another thing that I try to remember, which is that if you know someone's story, more often than not, if you know somebody that you just don't like, or somebody that doesn't like you, or you know what I mean, like somebody you just don't have a great relationship with, if you knew the truth about what they have been through and what brought them to this point, you would instantly like them.
Mm-hmm.
Because you would be on their team.
Yeah.
Right? When you know, because this is the thing, people don't come to the conclusions about things happenstance.
Yeah.
They don't, you're like, you look at that person that you were, and you look at the person you are now, and you see two different people almost, right? It's like, I know I do. Okay, I don't want to speak for you, but that person that I was back then, it's like every day changes you, and I've had a lot of days since then.
Right.
Yep. I mean, we're talking, when I was 16, it was 1996.
Yeah.
It was a completely different world. And I sort of grew up with the internet, right? The internet and I are basically the same age. And we had it in our house before it was cool.
Yeah, yeah.
So...
pioneers, right?
Right, like back when it was like no one's ever gonna like have this.
No one's gonna work on the internet.
Yeah, what are you? It's just crazy.
Yeah, it was very niche back then.
Yeah. And so cut to today when we're adults and we can sort of hopefully have that eternal perspective, or have that perspective that the Lord gives you when you sort of know the facts and believe them as true. You go, some people are just insufferable, but they are doing the best that they can. What you're getting right now is the best that they could muster, given everything that they've been through.
Yeah.
Right? So somebody who is really difficult to deal with, who has a sour personality, it's very well possible that it's because they've been through things that they can't repeat. And if that's the case, and they're not going to tell you, they're not wearing a t-shirt that says, parents abandoned me, or, you know what I mean, addicted to drugs for 20 years or something like that. My wife's got a friend who's in prison now and is going to be until 2036.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, has he been in before? She says, yeah, twice. Wow. Two, you know what I mean? You and I, like, if either one of us went to prison, it would be like before we went to prison and after.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It would be
major
shattering, and here this guy's been there 3 times.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just, like I say, like, not to say we shouldn't have standards for people, but when we think about mental health, or we think about how people are, or how they're coping with the way things are, we should try to remember, like, sometimes they're just doing everything they can to be present and to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, it might be kind
of
nuts,
in and
of
itself is a victory for them.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is so tied. Like I said, you cannot divorce mental health from spiritual health, because it's all connected. And so I'll go to this. This really puts it in perspective. One of the first recorded in, I'll say the Bible, but really history, because I believe the Bible, everything in it literally happened. At least it's meant to be read that way. We take the first example where there was a human conflict, right? And that really was Cain and Abel. And when God came to him and said, where's your brother? I'm paraphrasing, but basically his response was, am I my brother's keeper? And that, I'll just be honest with you here, getting personal. For the longest time, I grew up, in church, and I grew up hearing these things, Bible stories and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't really know it longer than I care to admit. I spent my life thinking, Yeah, Cain said, my brother, I don't have to worry about. I should be worried about myself. Kind of like taking responsibility for yourself. I kind of had this spin in my
When he
mind.
said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" You were like, "Yeah."
Yeah, like, isn't that true? But I realized later in life, like, I haven't given it much thought, and that's really what it boiled down to. Is I just didn't think about it like I should have, and another point is like nobody specifically addressed that with me, both in church or in person. Like I never had any but it was like God was speaking to me one day, and He was saying, I want you to focus on what's being said here because it's very important. And I did, and the longer I thought about it, I realized, Cain was absolutely, like, obviously he just murdered his brother. So he was not thinking in a spiritual sense. He was thinking very fleshly, in a fleshly sense, a carnal sense. And that is, I don't need to be worried about anybody else but myself. Like, what's it to me that, you can't find my brother? Am I responsible for him? But yes, actually, it's there for our learning. All Scripture is given for our learning, right? That's what the Bible says. And the moral of the story there is we should be our brother's keeper. Not only should you, yes, we're talking about mental health, and you got to take care of yourself, right? But even the Bible says every man, for the most part, takes care of himself. So much like you take care of yourself, take care of your brother, take care of your sister. And I'm speaking metaphorically, like, we would say brothers and sisters in Christ, those are the believers, but we're really your fellow man. Like that's, if the lost world that doesn't know Christ, if they're ever going to care, they have to see that we care about them as people. And that's why we're telling them about Christ. We're not trying to fill a quota. We're not trying to be religious. We're not trying to earn heaven by telling people that.
Definitely.
Because we don't believe in any of that. We believe that it's all based on Christ, whether we're going to heaven or not. Nothing that we do, not by our works. So telling people about Christ should come out of a genuine concern and compassion about people. And really, if anybody's dealing with mental health, the best thing that we can do, and they may not see it as this way, right? In hindsight, they probably would. But they may not see the best thing we could give them is to share Christ with them, to share the gospel, because that's the first step in being able to have be able to have good spiritual health, and in turn have good mental health. So
when I was not a believer, I had a friend who was, and he would share the gospel with me, and I remembered thinking, well, that's nice, but it doesn't really help me
right now.
Yeah. It's like, okay, I get it. I get what you're saying. Not that I accepted it as true, but I understood the point, or I understood the message for laying it out on the table and saying this is what the message is. I wouldn't even say that I fully understood it the way I do now until maybe like 5 years after being saved.
Yeah. Sometimes people view that as like life insurance. You go to talk to a young person about life insurance, it doesn't really mean much to them. Somebody in their life, they're like, oh yeah, I need to get this in order.
Yeah. And so when we talk about sharing the gospel with someone, there's also the component of how it impacts life day to day.
Right.
And so many times I hear sort of like I say, messages that are like, well, that's technically true, but how does that really apply to this situation, right? And we can make clear for someone who has mental health struggles that not only do you find a benefit from accepting the Lord, but also here's how this is dealt with in the Word, right? And in order to know that, you need to arm yourself with those tools, right? I'm mixing metaphors there, but you need to prepare yourself to be able to share with someone how the truth of the gospel actually impacts their mental health. And like, okay, I get it.
Life.
Yeah, okay, I get it. When I die, I'll be saved by the blood and not by my actions.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's awesome, and I totally agree. But how does that help me in my situation with my family or my boss or whatever? How does it help me when I'm standing in the grocery store and I'm trying to decide between garbage and good food or whatever? How do these things apply? And so those tools, I think you get that from going to a good church with good messages and through personal study and through just basically like knowing the word, being in prayer, being sensitive to the Spirit, you know what I mean, being in fellowship and giving of your time and energy to something greater than you.
Yeah.
And those 4 things, and we could even do a podcast about just those 4 things, which I guess maybe I should probably write that down because I definitely have a lot to say about that. Mm-hmm. But those 4 things to me are the 4 basic, like the 4 biggest things that Christians are sort of called to, or are the key components. Like, you have to learn those 4 things.
Yeah.
In order to be prepared to, by the way, make disciples.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is what we're talking about, really, right? It's like you share the word with somebody, and then we're called to make them into a disciple or a follower.
Yes.
Right? And what are the key components of that? Those 4 things. What does that mean? That means we share that with another person. Bro, I will pray for you for X amount of days. Mm-hmm. I will, you know what I mean? We heard about this need. We're going to address that need. You know what I mean? I owe it to myself to interact with the Holy Spirit the way that I feel is the true way and not by man's definition of it. So if somebody thinks I'm crazy because I say the Lord led me to it, I got to be willing to be okay with that.
Yeah, stand alone.
You know? Mm-hmm. And so it's like those are just small examples of the larger idea, which is being your brother's keeper.
Yes.
Yeah. Part of it is taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others.
Yes. Yep.
Believing
the oxygen mask thing on the plane, like fix your oxygen mask before you help others.
Yeah.
If you're going to help somebody with the Word of God, which is really what we should do as believers, you have to be helped by the Word of God. Like the only thing I can contribute in any conversation with anybody is what the Holy Spirit has already spoken to me about. I don't have anything to offer people in and of myself. I don't have anything to offer this podcast in and of myself. Like it's what God has done in me or what He has placed in my heart to be able to share with others. That's the only good in me. So.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
2 down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's good. I mean, I think so I'll say this, the topics that we have gone through, and just a high level overview, I think I had 9 of them or maybe 10, and you could make an episode on each one of those alone. So again, I wanted this to be a high level overview, but I mean, I spent a lot of time in the beginning about the issues that can affect mental health, right? And I'd really like to be able to tie it up with, what is the hope? And I think we really did. Like, we really got there as far as, like, the answer is Christ. There's a lot of answers in that, right? All these, you can address all these points that we brought up. But ultimately, if we, so say you're a believer, or even if you're not a believer, if you'll at least humor us in this analogy of, if we are in fact created by God, He is our creator, He has a certain way that He made us to be. And you've alluded to this many times in this podcast, that if we're out of sync with that, that's when problems start happening. And He has a design for our lives, and if we will get on that design. Now, does that mean everybody that's following Christ and is a believer that they don't have any problems? Far from it. Far from it. But you're seeing the problems that we're having. You're seeing the times where we are not in sync with what God wants us to do, right? Because that's how easy I can be in sync when I wake up. An hour later, I can be out of sync, and that's me. That's on me. That's not a shortcoming of God. It's that God allows me to act upon my own will, and I make wrong decisions, and that can lead to problems. So what's kind of the answer to this? And we've touched on it many times, but really the real answer is the Bible says, for me to live is Christ. And again, we're talking about mental health here. It says in Philippians, Paul actually goes as far as to say, to die is gain. And the only reason why he can say that is because he has he has faith in the Lord Jesus Christ to go along with his promise to us and saying, if you call upon me, then I will answer you, and saying that you will be saved. Call upon the name of the Lord and you shall be saved. So we know that for whatever God has a time frame. He knows how long we have to live, each one of us. And the time that we have here on this earth, our lives should be about Christ. And anything outside of that, we're just really spinning our wheels. We can have accolades, we can achieve things, we can have all this success in the world, but ultimately it does not make us happy. What the only true fulfillment is, because if we are, like, go with us here on this analogy, if we are created by God, if we're on his plan, that's when we're truly happy, when we're doing what we have been created to do.
Yeah, outside of the realm of understanding things in a Christian light, you hear about famous people all the time who say, I achieved every one of my dreams, and in the end I was empty.
Yes.
You hear it all the time. I achieved everything I could ever imagine, and in the end it was a vapor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And really this hits, when somebody really came to Jesus Christ himself and said, what are the two greatest commandments? He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second is like unto it. He said, love your neighbor as yourself. So really, the answer to this is twofold, just like Jesus himself said. So here I am. This is not just Josh telling you what I think the answer for life's problems or anything. I'm quoting Jesus here. I'm saying, so I've already touched on, like, for me to live is Christ. That's kind of goes along with what Jesus said with love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. But then secondly, about loving your neighbor, sometimes when we're really struggling, the best thing for us to do, like I've said earlier, is, and you've said as well, focusing less on yourself and focusing on helping others more. In so doing, we help ourselves. And the Bible puts this beautifully in Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 says, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, like viewing ourselves humbly. It says, let each esteem other better than themselves. It's just, the Bible is saying, view your fellow man as better than you. And in so doing, we have the pride. Our image of ourselves naturally becomes better because we're saying, it's not about me, it's about God and others. And
when you think about that verse,
mm-hmm.
as that verse is so critical, it's up there with one of my most favorite verses because of the context around it. Remember, this is the tail end of Paul's ministry.
Yes.
This is imprisoned. Okay.
If anybody could be struggling with mental health, it would be Paul right here. Yes.
If he has an opportunity right now to tell you something very important, okay, his death is imminent.
Yes.
It's not, I'll go here, I'll go there. I don't know if it's confirmed or not, but as I understand it, he's released from prison at one point. He does some traveling, and he writes a little bit more after Acts ends.
Right.
Okay, that verse was written before Acts is ended, but all the same to say, he knows the end is coming. Yeah. He's in Rome.
We're listening to a man faced with his own mortality.
He knows that the clock is winding down. He's not going to go back to Antioch. He's not going to go back to Jerusalem. If he did, he would be in just as much peril there as he is in Rome.
Right.
Right? In all of that chaos and sort of like uncertainty, and obviously like the death that he's going to suffer is not like dying in your sleep, right? It's going to be a shameful death. It's going to be painful. He's going to embrace pain, right? He could say anything he wants. What does he choose to say? Read that verse again.
He says, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves.
Whew! Oh, it gives me so much, it fires me up.
It goes on to say, look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. What's important, not what's important to you, but look at what's important to others and make that a form of ministry.
And that is so, that's a common theme in those books that are all written around that time, all those letters that are written around that time, like James,
Yes.
1 Peter, 2 Peter, which what is that from? That's
Philippians.
Yeah. Okay. But like 1 Peter and like Timothy, like 2 Timothy, Titus, all these books, that's a central theme.
Yes.
I'm going to mention this in another podcast. I'll just say it now because I have it planned in my notes.
Uh-huh.
We'll get to those notes at some point.
Yeah.
God he's put the church in a boat on a lake, and he's going to push it out.
Yeah.
And he says,
out to sea.
Here's my word. Here's your sail. Here's the wind.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
And he's saying, like, I'm giving you everything you need.
Giving you everything you need for life and godliness.
Yep.
Is going to be right here, and he's going to push it out into the ocean. What happens after this? There's not going to be, there's nothing more to add to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It says, like, the word was given once and for all to the saints.
Yes. Yeah.
This is going to be the message that you are to carry to others. Regard others as more important than yourself.
Right.
He could have said, do whatever you can for yourself. Get yours.
Yeah.
Because life is short. And that's the message that you talked about society and social media in the beginning of this podcast. And it's like, that's their thing.
Yep.
It's
about you.
It's about
on
me.
Social media. Yeah.
And so that's a sickness in itself.
Yep.
So what's the symptom of that sickness? Anxiety, depression, all this mental health stuff.
Yep.
All this emotional health stuff.
Yep.
Physical health being tied to that.
And again, not to diminish any of that, but it really, like, was it last episode now? I'm losing track already, but where we were talking about
We've had so many.
But yeah, where, the perspective, right? Making big things seem small. Not literally making them small, and I may have misquoted it in the first one, but not literally making, like, diminishing it or saying, not that big of a deal. Not that way, but saying, making it seem small in light of Christ and eternity and all those things. And that's that. So all this discussion that we've had here in this podcast is not to diminish what people are going through, but it's rather than saying, we're not saying what you're going through is so small, but we're saying God is that big.
Exactly.
God is that big that he anything you're going through, like, we can't necessarily spell out for you what you exactly need to do, but we know that he can, and having a relationship and a walk with him will get you on the right path to that.
And probably is.
Yeah.
And probably is in the midst of telling you.
Yeah. He's trying to get your attention.
Yeah, he's trying to get your attention.
Yeah.
He is, like, I look at it to, when you're in a small kitchen with someone, like, say it's you and your wife, and you have, like, a small kitchen, and you're kind of bumping into each other, and, like, you have, like, you got to turn around, and you're like, oh, that's where the Lord is. He's right behind you.
Yeah.
And he's like, hi, how's it going?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, sorry, let me just get, and
he's always one step away.
Right, always right
yeah.
there, and ahead of you, and behind you, and beside you, and all those things, So, yeah, we're not saying what you're going through in terms of mental health is nothing. We're saying it is something, and here's a lifeline.
It's so big that you need the God of the universe to help you. That's, anything, putting it in the right perspective. Yeah.
Yep. Not only do you need it, it's there for you. About the only thing I bring to it is total dependence.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it really is like, and I've said that 100 times, but it's like, it's there for you, and prayerfully you'll consider it, and if you have somebody in your life that you respect spiritually, maybe they can help you or talk to you or at least listen. Yeah.
Even the Ethiopian eunuch, he said, I'm reading this, I've opened God's word, trying to understand these things, but how can I understand unless somebody help me? And that's the case with a lot of people. Maybe you're saying, what I'm hearing you guys say, it makes a lot of sense, but I still need help understanding it. Well, seek it out. Like, ultimately, the Lord will help you, but oftentimes he does it in the form of sending you somebody your way, or maybe he's telling you, go out and seek somebody to help you understand. The more you understand God's word, the more you understand just your nature, his nature, how this world works, how life works, what is our purpose, the better chances you have with battling any of this stuff that we're talking about. So seek that out. That's my one encouragement to those you listening. Even if you are a believer, man, myself included, I'm including myself in this, I need to seek it out more than I do. We can always seek out God and his word even more than we are currently.
Yeah. Yep. Wow. Awesome.
Good stuff.
You've been listening to the Life and Faith podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Stay up to date on all our episodes, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.